the crystal chandelier threw flickering shadows across the dining room, its light refracting off polished silver and untouched crystal. I sat in silence, nudging my untouched beef Wellington across the porcelain plate. Family dinners were always tightrope affairs, but tonight the wire felt thinner, trembling under the weight of something unsaid. My parents kept exchanging looks across the table, their glances sharp and deliberate. "Emma," my mother said at last, setting her wine glass down with the grace of a stage performer hitting her mark, "your father and I have been talking about your situation." I looked up and met her eyes, flawlessly made up. Unreadable. At 28, I was the odd one out in the Anderson trio, the disappointment, the one who hadn't followed the preordained path through law school into the marble halls of Anderson Associates. Situation? I kept my tone even, though my chest tightened. Across the table, Victoria smirked behind her wine. At 32, she was already a junior partner, the golden child in a navy blazer. Beside her, Michael, 2 years my junior and freshly minted with a law degree, was quickly climbing the ranks, his ambition only slightly less polished than hers. "Yes," Dad said, clearing his throat in that signature way that meant he was about to deliver a verdict. "Your refusal to join the firm, this startup, it's gone on long enough." My fingers tightened around my fork. That startup was a company I'd built from the ground up, an AI-driven legal research tool I believed could actually change the profession they so proudly clung to. But to them, it was nothing more than a childish distraction. "We're cutting you off," Mom said, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. "No more access to the trust, no more family apartment, no more credit cards. It's time to grow up and take your place." The room went still. Victoria's smirk deepened. Michael focused intently on his green beans. "I haven't touched the trust in 2 years, I said quietly. "Don't be absurd," Mom snapped. "How else do you think you've been surviving with that little computer hobby?" Before I could answer, Victoria chimed in. "Patricia from Morgan Stanley says your company's barely breaking even." I almost laughed. Patricia from Morgan Stanley hadn't seen a single financial statement. We'd stayed private by design, deliberately off the radar while we refined our tech. "Actually, I began, but Dad raised a hand. "No more arguments. You have 2 choices. Join the firm as a first-year associate, or be cut off entirely. The paperwork for the trust fund has already been finalized." "I'm not joining the firm," I said, steady and unflinching. Mom drew in a sharp breath. "Then you leave us no choice." Her voice trembled with false nobility. "We're doing this for your own good. You can't keep playing entrepreneur forever." Just then, my phone buzzed. Normally I'd silence it for these dinners, another one of Mom's endless rules, but tonight, I'd left it on purpose. The screen lit up with my assistant's name. "Excuse me," I said, rising from my seat. "Emma," Mom's voice cracked like a whip, "we are having a family discussion." I answered anyway and placed the phone on speaker. "Yes, Sophia? Apologies for interrupting, Merson," my assistant said crisply, her voice echoing through the room. "But per your request, I'm notifying you immediately. Our stock just crossed $90 million in the private trading round. Morgan Stanley is requesting a meeting to discuss taking the company public." Silence. Victoria's fork slipped from her hand with a soft clatter. Michael nearly choked on his wine. Mom's expression shattered, frozen in a mask of disbelief. "Thank you, Sophia," I said smoothly. "Schedule the meeting for tomorrow morning." I ended the call and took a slow look around the table. The chandelier's glow now felt like a spotlight, catching every crack in their carefully constructed version of me. "You were saying something about cutting me off?" I asked, tilting an eyebrow. Dad's face flushed an angry crimson. "But, how is this possible?" I calmly pulled out my chair and sat down, finally taking a bite of my now cold Wellington. Victory, as it turned out, had a surprisingly rich flavor. $90 million? Victoria whispered, dazed. Her smirk was nowhere to be found. "Actually," I replied, dabbing my mouth with a linen napkin, "that's just the stock price. Our total valuation is much higher." Mom reached for her wine, her hand trembling slightly. "But Patricia from Morgan Stanley said." "Patricia from Morgan Stanley," I cut in, "knows absolutely nothing about my company. We've kept everything confidential, for strategic reasons." What was supposed to be an ambush had flipped entirely. I watched as their narrative unraveled, and for the first time, I didn't shrink under the weight of their expectations. I towered above them. They had never seen me, never believed in me, and now they had no choice. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I stepped into Morgan Stanley's Manhattan office dressed in my favorite power suit. Gone was the Emma who'd once wilted under her family's judgment. Today, I was the CEO of Legal Tech AI, the founder behind the company redefining an entire industry. Ms. Anderson, Patricia herself greeted me at the elevator, the same woman who'd clearly underestimated me at her country club. I had no idea you were the founder of Legal Tech. Why didn't you ever mention it at the club? I gave her a polite smile. I prefer letting my results speak for themselves. Inside the conference room, a dozen bankers and analysts waited, eyes bright with interest. My CFO, David, began the presentation, outlining our 3-year trajectory, sustained growth, zero debt, and a client base that included 8 of the top 10 firms in the country. Except Anderson Associates, one analyst noted, peering over his glasses. Any reason your family's firm isn't using your platform? The room stilled. In legal circles, everyone knew the Anderson name. Anderson Associates prefers more traditional methods, I said with a measured smile. We respect their commitment to history. Several people chuckled, knowing full well what traditional meant: resistant, outdated, unwilling to evolve. After the meeting, Patricia caught me at the elevators again. Emma, your mother must be so proud. She never. Actually, I said, cutting her off, they found out last night, but feel free to bring it up at your next tennis match. Back at the office, Sophia was fielding the inevitable fallout. Your father's called 6 times. Victoria's downstairs demanding to see you. Michael's been sending LinkedIn requests to the whole executive team. I kicked off my heels and settled behind my desk. Send Victoria up. Let's get this over with. Minutes later, my sister stormed into my office, her perfectly curated appearance looking slightly frayed. What the hell is wrong with you? She snapped. Do you even understand what you've done? Built a successful company, revolutionized legal research, made millions without leaning on Dad? I said, leaning back in my chair. Don't be cute, she hissed. Dad's reputation is on the line. You made him look like a fool. Everyone's asking why Anderson Associates isn't using their own daughter's software. Maybe it looks the same way it did when you all mocked my little project for 3 years. We were trying to protect you, she said, exasperated. This industry is built on legacy, tradition, connections. And that's exactly the problem, I interrupted. While you're clinging to leather chairs and dusty law books, the industry is moving forward, and I'm already leading that future. She stared at me, stunned. Then, in a last-ditch move, she dropped the bombshell. Dad wants you to sell. He's willing to forgive everything if you sell Legal Tech and come back to the firm, Victoria said, her voice tinged with desperation. He'll even make you partner in 2 years. I laughed, the sound sharp and satisfying. Partner, Victoria? I shook my head. I'm about to take my company public. By the end of the year, I'll be worth more than Anderson and Associates combined. The blood drained from her face. What? You heard me, and here's something you might want to know. Townsend Myers, your biggest competitor, they signed a contract with us yesterday. Their research efficiency has already improved by 60%. Victoria sank into one of my office chairs, staring blankly. This will kill Dad. No, I said firmly, this will wake him up. The world is changing, Victoria. He can either adapt, or watch his firm become obsolete. As Victoria left my office, visibly shaken, I turned toward the city skyline. The family dinner that was supposed to bring me down had only revealed how far I'd come. But something told me this was just the beginning. My phone buzzed again, the familiar name on the screen, Mom. She was relentless. We're having an emergency family meeting tonight. Your attendance is mandatory. I smirked as I typed back, sorry, can't make it. I've got a board meeting about our IPO. Feel free to read about it in tomorrow's Wall Street Journal. Then I turned back to my laptop. I had an empire to build. The article dropped at 6 a.m. sharp. Legal Tech AI, the billion-dollar startup revolutionizing legal research, how Emma Anderson built an empire while her family's law firm wasn't looking. I read it from the comfort of my penthouse apartment, the one I'd bought myself, not the family property they threatened to take away. The article was thorough, detailing how I'd identified a gap in the legal market that firms like Anderson and Associates had refused to acknowledge. It wasn't just informative, it was a triumph. At 6:05 a.m., my phone started ringing. I let it go to voicemail, preferring to dive into the flood of emails pouring into my inbox, law firms across the country begging for demos, investors clamoring for meetings, and tech blogs already hailing legal tech as the future of the industry. Sophia's voice buzzed through the intercom. "Ms. Anderson, your mother's in the lobby. She's refusing to leave without seeing you." I sighed. "Send her up." Minutes later, Mom appeared in my office, her usual composure gone, her eyes wide as she took in the sleek apartment, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern art, the sweeping view of Central Park. "You live here?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "For the past year," I replied coolly. "Would you like some coffee?" She nodded, sinking into my designer sofa. I poured her a cup from the ridiculously expensive coffee machine, another luxury I'd earned on my own. "The article," she began, her voice faltering. "Your father, he's not well. Because his firm is now publicly known to be behind the times?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Because his daughter blindsided him," she snapped, then caught herself. "Emma, why didn't you tell us?" "I tried, Mom, for 3 years. I tried to tell you. I told both of you what I was building, but you were too busy pushing me to join the firm, too convinced I was wasting my time." "But, $1 billion. She whispered the words like they were foreign to her. "The article says you'll be one of the youngest female tech billionaires in the country." Funny how success changes people's definition of waste, doesn't it? Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from David. "Townsend Myers just announced they're moving all operations to legal tech systems. Stocks up another 30%. Mom's phone rang. It was Dad, just learning that his biggest competitor was now using his daughter's software. "He'll never forgive you," she said quietly. "No," I corrected her, voice steady. "He'll never forgive himself. There's a difference." After she left, I headed to the office, where the energy was electric. Everyone had read the article. The buzz in the air was contagious. As I walked through the open workspace, my employees stood, applauding. "Speech," someone called out. I smiled, looking around at the faces of people who had believed in me when my own family hadn't. 3 years ago, I began, everyone said legal tech couldn't work, that law firms wouldn't change, that tradition was too strong, but we proved them wrong. The applause was deafening. Then Sophia rushed over, holding her phone. "Anderson Associates is calling an emergency press conference," she said. I watched it live from my office. Dad stood at the podium, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Victoria and Michael flanked him, their faces tight, trying to maintain their usual confident airs. "Anderson Associates is proud to announce a complete digital transformation," Dad read stiffly. "We will be partnering with leading legal tech companies to modernize our operations." I turned off the stream. They still didn't get it. There was only one leading legal tech company. And I owned it.